Welcome to the Center for U.S. War Veterans Oral Histories at the National Guard Militia Museum of New Jersey in Seagirt, a partner of the Library of Congress's Veterans History Project. Today is December 21st, 2007. I am Carol Fowler. My distinguished veteran is James H. Myers, who served in the United States Army during World War II in the Pacific Theater of Operations. James served from November of '42 until December of '45 with the 722nd SAW Company, Company A, 598th SAW Battalion. Thank you for wanting to share your memories here with us today, James. Your eyewitness account is considered a primary historical source and a valuable contribution to the Oral History Project here at the Militia Museum. Good afternoon and welcome.
Thank you.
James, can you take us back to December 7th, 1941, and what you recall of the attack on Pearl Harbor?
Well, my girlfriend and I were out for a Sunday afternoon ride, and we heard it on the radio.
And where was that? Long Branch or down?
Well, it was actually Middletown Township.
Oh, okay. And what were your reactions?
Well, in the beginning, you know, didn't really know too much about it, what was going on, where it was. But then, you know, in a couple of days, we really knew what happened, and then from there on,
And so you were a student at the time? You were in high school?
I was a senior in Middletown Township High School, Leonardo. And I graduated in June 1942 and went to work on Haskell's estate as a gardener's helper. And I knew that my age and everything, I'd be subject to being drafted, you know, I was sure I'd be drafted. So I talked it over with my parents, and I decided that I would enlist in the Army.
Why the Army?
Well, my father had been in World War II, but that didn't really mean, you know, too much as far as why I wanted, World War I, before I, you know, really knew what I wanted to do. And Fort Monmouth was close. So I kind of decided I'd like to be in the Signal Corps. So that's the way I proceeded. And I enlisted before I was 19, so my parents had to sign. I was only 18, actually. And, well, I don't know the exact date, but it was November of 1942 when I got dropped off at Fort Monmouth and waited for a truck to take me over to Camp Wood.
Where was that?
Eatontown. And then, in turn, they were to get me a transportation down here to Seagirt. It was Camp Edison. And that's where I got my basic training, it was here.
Was it called Camp Edison because the governor's name was Edison at the time?
I think it was named, well, I don't know. I assumed it was named after Edison. He wasn't the governor then. I don't recall.
Okay.
But it was named after, I assumed it was named after a governor, but I'm not sure. And I was at Camp Wood, and I didn't get issued a uniform for about a week or two. I was doing KP in civilian clothes. And finally, they got a truck coming down here to Seagirt, and they brought me down here. And I never forget, it was on Friday. This was where I got my basic training. This is where they gave the Signal Corps basic training. And it was on a Friday, and I got down here just about lunchtime, and they sent me to the mess hall, and they had chicken chow mein in an aluminum mess kit. And I almost got sick because I wasn't used to that, you know. And from there on, hey, I'll tell you, I got the best basic training the Army had at the time, really. They gave the best basic training here that anybody could ask for. It was a little tough because it was exactly 65 years ago. It was December, and it was cold. that winter of 42 and 43 was really cold. And laying out on a rifle range on the frozen ground for, you know, a couple hours and all that kind of stuff. But they would, once in a, you know, you got issued a rifle and gas mask and the whole works, everything they had. They didn't have, I remember here I tried to get a complete set of equipment, you know, everything we needed, clothing and everything. They had no long john bottoms, they had no galoshes. There was a lot of things that they didn't have, you know, and they were waiting for them to come in, and eventually you ended up getting them, but it was a wait. They might wake you up 2 o'clock in the morning and tell you get out with a full pack gas mask, rifle, and the whole thing, and get ready to go. And then they might take you for a walk around the area, or they might just tell you to go back and go to bed. And it was really, I felt, the best training that the Army had at the time. And I believe it was 6 weeks, 6 or 8 weeks. And then we graduated, and the graduation present was a hike to Camp Wood, which is like 12 or 14 miles, you know. Walk.
How did you go? 30, I guess only 35.
Yeah, we went, as I can recall, I can't recall the whole thing, but we went 71 for a ways, and then we cut across, and we ended up almost dark out at Pine Brook, somewhere out around Pine Brook. They had, you know, area out there that they were using for a maneuver area. And
that's a golf course now, right?
Well, I don't know. You mean the Fort Monmouth golf course?
Yeah.
No.
Oh, okay.
That was in effect then. They had the golf course back then.
Oh, maybe there's housing there now, or there was.
No, it was a little further west.
Oh, okay.
More like where Earl is, you know. So anyway, we ate out that night. And then they finally got us to barracks in Camp Wood. And that's where I went to school, went to switchboard operator school.
When you were in Seagirt, what were living conditions like here for you?
Oh, good. They were great.
Oh, yeah?
Oh, yeah, this was great. No complaints about this place at all. Had all the facilities you needed, everything you needed. They had a nice PX. The big thing I remember about the PX was it was this time of year, you know. And the song White Christmas had just come out. They played that incessantly in the PX, time after time after time. They just kept playing that over and over and over. And but no, this was a nice place. It was really good. Had all the facilities you needed, everything you needed. And to mention basic training and what happened later on, we learned everything here that we had to know. And we had guys come into our outfit from the hotels in Atlantic City and Miami Beach, and they'd been there for like maybe 3, 4, 5 months. They didn't know anything. They knew nothing about military. The only thing they could do is they could march. That's all they did was march. And they could do that. But as far as knowing anything about being a soldier, they did not know. And we had to more or less teach them everything as went along, you know.
For example?
Tell them how to roll a pack and how to do everything. Couldn't even lace up a pair of leggings, they couldn't. I mean, they were really bad. They didn't have any equipment. They had no idea what Army equipment was. It was strange, really. But anyway, got to Camp Wood and went to switchboard operator school and enjoyed it. We eventually got to operate the Camp Wood switchboard. They had female operators on during the day, and then at night, when things quieted down and it wasn't too busy, why they put us on there, you know, to learn what the switchboard was like and how it was and what to do and so forth. Even though we never got faced with something like that before, you know, that was some kind of a big installation. We never had anything like that. And then, I don't know how long was at Camp Wood.
Is that Camp Charleswood?
Yeah, right.
Is that where the Hexagon building is?
Yep.
Okay.
That's where, and they have a lot of military housing. They did have, but
yes.
They've torn it all down now, I guess. Yeah, it's all down.
And that's where you stayed? No.
Pardon?
Where did you stay in Camp Wood?
Well, they had barracks.
Oh, okay.
Oh yeah, lots of barracks. They had just more or less been built, you know. over a period of probably a year or so. Oh yeah, had barracks, everything. And when I was here and when I was there, I was the 2nd Signal Training Regiment, is what we were in. And we learned a lot. Everybody was in the Signal Corps. And one thing I remember is everybody in the Signal Corps learned how to splice wire. It didn't matter if you were going to be a radio operator or what you were going to be, you learned how to splice telephone wire. And I went on and like I said, finished the switchboard operators course. And then they were going to assign us to different posts around the country. You know, some of the fellows, some of the linemen that had at that time had trained to be linemen. A lot of them went up on the Alcan Highway in Alaska. They sent a lot of them up there. And anyway, there was a group of 6 of us that were going to Drew Field, Tampa, Florida. And we didn't know what that was all about, but they put me in charge of a group of 6 men. And I had never been out of New Jersey, really. And we went to New York, got a train to Washington, had changed trains in Washington, got on a sleeper. It was a civilian train, but it was just the 6 of us. And we had sleeper, and going down through Virginia, I guess almost to North Carolina, about 2 o'clock in the morning, I guess it was, conductor came and woke me up. He says, "One of your guys is sick." He said, "He's bad." And I said, "Boy, what are we going to do? What do you do about that?" I had no idea what to do. Mm-hmm. He says, "Well, the only thing I can suggest is," he says, "we can stop the train in, I forget the name of the town, North Carolina." And he said, "Somebody from Fort Bragg can meet the train there and take him to the hospital." So I said, "Well, yeah, sounds good to me." So that's what they did. They stopped the train, they took him off.
Is that Fayetteville?
Yeah, I guess, probably it was, yeah. And then we continued on.
What was wrong? He had a fever?
Well, we found out later. He caught up with us down in Drew Field, and we saw him about 2 months later. He had appendicitis. He had to be operated on immediately.
He could have died.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Didn't realize how bad it was. So anyway, we got to Drew Field, and they assigned us more or less to units. And I was what was supposed to be the 719th Signal Aircraft Warning Company. That's what that SAW is, a Signal Aircraft Warning. It was actually radar, but we didn't have anything to do with that because I was trained for communications. So they sent us to an abandoned CCC camp down on the edge of the Everglades. And we were down there for about a month or so. They didn't have any housing for us.
Was there a name?
Drew Field.
Was there a name for that camp?
No, not really.
Interesting.
All we knew it was an abandoned CCC camp. And we stayed there about a month.
With no housing? So what did you do?
March, drill.
No, I mean, how did you live?
Oh, there were the barracks, but they had to be made habitable, They were there, but they'd been abandoned for a couple of years. And yeah, we stayed in barracks. It was okay there. That was all right. But the water was terrible. The water was absolutely, nobody could drink it. It was sulfur water. Nobody could drink it. We lived on coke for about a month. Then they sent us back to Drew Field, and they still didn't have enough housing or get us in permanent units. So they then sent us to what was the 722nd Signal Aircraft Warning Company. And they put us in a ball field in Dunedin, Florida. It was a ball field, and we lived in tents. We had tents, and we stayed there for about, I don't know, maybe 6 weeks. We were there for quite a while.
And what did you do there on a typical day?
Well, I got a picture probably of me on guard duty there. No, not me, another fellow. We did guard duty. The radio operators set up a radio, and they had communication with Drew Field. They did that. And other than that, march, did close order drill, calisthenics, that kind of thing. That's all. No real training for what we were going to do and be. So eventually they took us back to Drew Field, and they filled out, of course they were in the process of filling the company out with the type of people they needed, you know. Actually what a company was, they had 2 reporting platoons. They are the ones that had a radar set. And the radar set consisted of an antenna truck, an operations truck, a power van, and I guess that was it. Because we never got to do much with that. We never saw much of that, you know, because radar was really kind of super secretive. Even the military people, like me and people like us that weren't involved with radar itself, really weren't supposed to be in there, you know, in the operations van or anything, because it was so secret. But anyway, we got filled out with our complement, you know, so we became an active company. There were two platoons of reporting. There were 2 reporting platoons, and 1 headquarters and plotting platoon. And what we had at that time, we got the equipment finally. It was called an ANTTQ-1. That was Army Navy Telephone Equipment -1. It was made by AT&T, and it was a completely portable information center. I mean, they had just used the boxes, and everything came with it. Even the seats, the chairs, the light bulbs even came with it. They were spot bulbs for over the plotting table. And we had a draftsman, and it was his job to make sure we could go anywhere in the world. We could be sent anywhere in the world, and he, within a day, could come up with a plotting table of that area. He had enough of the maps with him and all that he could come up with a plotting table. So the plotters plugged in at the table, and they got the information from the reporting platoons by radio usually. They could get it by telephone, but most of the time it was radio. And they would plot the planes as the radar would pick them up. They would plot the planes as they're coming in. And there was an Air Force officer. See, I'm saying Air Force, that's wrong. It's Air Corps, it was the Army Air Corps. We were attached to the Army Air Corps. Signal Corps attached to the Army Air Corps. And there was an Air Corps officer there, and he could have communication with the planes. So he could tell them where to go to pick up this raid that was coming in.
And this was in Florida?
Well, yeah, no, what we did then, when we got to be a company, they sent us up on Tennessee maneuvers, up to Tennessee.
Where in Tennessee?
Well, during the war, they took the middle part of Tennessee, which was like from Nashville, probably 50 miles east, and the whole center part of the state, from the Kentucky border to the Alabama border. The Army took it over, and that was maneuver area. And each maneuver would last maybe 10 days to 2 weeks. And it was as realistic as anything anybody could make. Nighttime, there might be an artillery outfit pull in town and set up and start firing blanks. And there were tanks all over the place, and really, you know, they had the red and blue forces. One force opposed the other. And then they had us. We were neutral. People in our, not only just us, but other units were designated as neutral, and you wore a white armband, and you couldn't be captured. But the red or the white, the red or the blue could be captured by the other side. And we were there all winter. That's the first time they held, the winter of 43, 44, is the first time they held Tennessee maneuvers all winter. They used to stop during the winter because it was too cold. But that year they kept it going, and then every year after they kept them going. And we were up there for about 6 months. And I've got pictures here, but we can look at them later if you want, whatever you want to do. We lived there, and we didn't do too bad. The engineers built what they called winterized tents. They were wood sides up so far, and then the tent was draped over it. and we had a stove, and it wasn't too bad. We did pretty good. Mud was terrible when we first went there, but it all straightened out eventually, and it wasn't too bad. We had it pretty good. And we had cots, and the food was good, and we had no really complaints, you know, except it was cold. And because we used to get out once in a while on some of the telephone lines, out maybe 15 or 20 miles away from our base, and the quartermaster had some places set up with shower facilities, and anybody could go in and get a shower and what for, you know, warm water, hot water, but there was ice on the ductboards. I mean, it was really cold. It was another cold winter. And in the spring, they sent us back to Drew Field. That was the spring of '44. And we then went down to Sarasota, Florida. And we lived in pup tents down there. And it was a place that had been going to be made into a development, you know, before the Depression. And everything stopped. Had streets and curbs and everything, but it was all full of trees and brush and everything, you know.
No houses.
No houses. So that's where they put us. We stayed there, and we pitched our tents, and we did all right. Wasn't bad. Wasn't too bad at all. And then April, I guess it was April or May, April, latter part of April, 1944, we're going to go overseas. So we got our troop train, and we went across the country.
You didn't get a chance to come home?
From Tennessee we did, yeah. Some guys got off at Thanksgiving, and then the rest of us got off at Christmas.
Oh, okay.
And that was a '44. So that was the last time that we got home. And then we...
Were you excited to be going overseas? Were you anxious?
Well, yeah, it was something to look forward to. We didn't know what it was going to be like, you know. We had no idea. So we got to the West Coast. We went to Camp Stoneman. And...
Where was that?
In California. And we were there about only a week, just to get our last series of shots and get certain equipment and everything for overseas. And you know about let me get it right now, the Delta Queen? You don't know about the Delta Queen?
No.
Well, that was a boat that was on the Mississippi River for the last 20 years or more. And it ran excursions, right? But that boat was then out in California, and they used it to take us from Camp Stoneman down to the Oakland Army Terminal, where we got the boat.
Was that like a paddle boat?
Yeah, paddle boat. And it was a luxurious boat, but they just used it for transportation between Camp Stoneman and Oakland Army Terminal, where you got the boat to go overseas.
That's pretty random, isn't it?
Pardon?
It's pretty random that you would go as a soldier on a paddle boat.
Well,
were you surprised?
They needed some, yeah, in a way, but it was standard procedure for Camp Stoneman. Everybody went from Camp Stoneman to the Oakland Army Terminal to catch the boat to go wherever they were going. Went down, you know, it probably was an hour trip, I'd say, by boat. And we got on the boat. It was called the Winged Arrow. It was a brand new Navy transport. And got underway, went out under the Golden Gate Bridge, and they served us supper, dinner, and it was hot dogs and sauerkraut. And before we got out of sight of the bridge, everybody was sick. And everybody was sick for the rest of the trip to Hawaii.
Oh, no.
5 days. Oh, everybody, even the crew. It was all new crew, you know. They hadn't been to sea before. It was Navy people, but they hadn't been to sea before. Everybody was seasick, even the officers.
Was it food poisoning?
No,
okay.
Just plain seasickness.
Wow.
Nobody had ever been exposed to it before, you know, it was the first time. And they say after the first time you're pretty good. Well, I'll show you a picture of one guy in there if I can remember it when I see him. he got near salt water and he got sick. He was awful. I mean, he was terrible.
Was the weather bad? Were the waves really high? Or?
It was a little rough, but it wasn't all that rough, you know, really. It wasn't all that rough. But it was just new to everybody, you know, and everybody was sick. 5 days to Hawaii. And we got to Hawaii.
Pearl Harbor?
Yeah. And then they took us over to the other side of the island. And the rumor was they were going to break us all up and send us to all different kinds of units. Well, I don't know. They changed their mind. I don't know if somebody changed it for them or what, but anyway, changed their mind. They sent us on the other side of the island first, up on the hill, and there were these hutments. They were small barracks, you know, for about 4 guys, 5 guys, maybe 6, and up on the side of the hill. And we were there for a couple of days, and then they said, no, we're going to go to Fort Shafter. So we went to Fort Shafter, up on the hill. And that was not too bad. It was a good post, you know. It was an old army post. Great place, really. Had all the facilities and everything. But all we wanted to do was get together again, you know. So finally they decided, yeah, they would bring us all together and put us back in the 722nd Signal Aircraft Warning Company. So they sent us to Bellows Field. That's on the other side of Oahu. And to called Tent City, but oh, it was bad. It was all sand. And we lived in tents. We had tents, but it was sand blowing around, and it was pretty bad. We were there for quite a while. I say from probably end of May to September. And we got the word. We had talked to guys that had been down to Anahuac and the Marshall Islands when they took them, you know, when they invaded them and took them. And the fellows talked to us about what it was like and everything, you know. So we were interested.
Were they soldiers or were they Marines?
Yeah, no, soldiers. And we got more equipment, and everything was shipshape. So we went, and we went down to Pearl Harbor. I mean, it was really Honolulu. And we got on the ship, the Cape Nettic. Was an Army transport. It wasn't a large ship, but it held a couple thousand people probably. And we got on, and we had all our equipment with us. And well, you'll see some pictures of that too. This equipment we had was crate after crate after crate, and it all had to be waterproofed, and it all had to be packed in crates, new crates, outside. And it was a job. We spent days doing that. Well, anyway, we got on the ship to Cape Nettic, and we left. And what really was supposed to happen is we were supposed to be in on the invasion of Yap. You've heard of that island, I guess. Mm-hmm. Yap. That's the one where they had the great big round stones for money. And we were supposed to go there. Well, we were on the, I don't know, we were on the ocean probably for about a week or 2. And we got the word that we weren't going to go to Yap. And we went on down south, across the equator, and we went on down south, and we went past a couple of Japanese-held islands at night because they were a little bit afraid of, they might be a little active, you know. They weren't supposed to be, but they might be.
Was your ship alone?
No, we were in a convoy, but it was a small convoy. There was only about maybe 4 other ships, plus a couple of destroyer escorts. That was all we had. And then when we came from the States, we didn't have any escort. When we went to Hawaii, from the States to Hawaii, I told you on the Winged Arrow, no escort then, just us. But when we left the second time, when we left from Hawaii, we had a small escort, and it was a small convoy. Anyway, make a long story short, MacArthur had decided that it was time to go into the Philippines. And he made the decision that they were going to go in sometime in September or October. Well, we had got on the ship, I don't know when it was, the date, somewhere, I've got it somewhere, it was around the middle of September, I guess. Anyway, on this trip to Cape Nettic, we were on that ship for 51 days. It was good, it was not a bad ship. We had 3 meals a day, which a lot of people didn't get 3 meals a day on a ship. But we had to eat all our meals standing up. All the tables were up high, you know, so you ate standing up. And but it was not bad. We had 3 meals a day. It may not have been great meals, but they were all right. So we went down to New Guinea, and we picked up some. Well, there was also on board, I should say, on board there was a CB maintenance company, and there were a couple other outfits on there. They were on more of the forward part of the ship. We didn't get to mingle with them much, so we didn't know much about them. And we picked up a few sailors at a port in New Guinea, and we took them up the coast to Hollandia and dropped them off. It was like a day trip for them. And then we went on up to Manus Island in the Admiralties. And we were there for, I don't know, maybe almost a week, laying there waiting. And we had heard that they invaded the Philippines, so we knew we were going there. And
how did you hear? Just word on ship?
Yeah, word of mouth. We had heard that we were now part of the 24th Corps. That was the 7th, the 77th, and the 96th Divisions. And we were part of the 24th Corps. So we started out to the Philippines, and we got about 2 days out, and they turned us around and sent us back, because that's when they had the Battle of Philippine Sea.
And your convoy wasn't large enough to handle?
No, they didn't want to get us mixed up in it, because honestly, they didn't know if they were going to win or lose.
And you had no battleships, no aircraft carriers?
No, nothing like that.
Right.
Down at the Admiralty Islands they did, but not in our convoy. So they turned us around, and then we won the battle. So they turned us around again. They sent us back, sent us on the way to Leyte. So we got there, I guess probably a week or two after the invasion. And
what did it look like?
We were on a ship for a long time. We didn't get off the ship. We laid in the harbor for I guess 10 days probably. What they did is they took one of our reporting platoons and sent them ashore to, I guess they really wanted a radar set to start working, you know. They had some working already. There were other companies up further near Tacloban. But anyway, they had them go ashore early. And the rest of us, the rest of the company, we stayed out on the ship. And every day they would take us to another ship and have us work, you know. One time they sent us to a ship, we unloaded 500-pound bombs. Another time we went to a ship and unloaded food, you know. We did just whatever they had to do, you know. We were just stevedores for a while.
Oh, okay.
So then they decided, okay, it was time for us to get ashore. And I think somebody from our platoon on shore had scouted the area and found a place where we could set up our camp. So they let us, this one night, they said we were going to get off late in the afternoon. So they gave us our last meal, you know, which was steak and everything, treated us real good as they could. And, okay, I got on a detail that was to load the barracks bags of all, you know, the whole company on to cargo nets, and they'd take them, swing them over the side, and it went in an LCT where the men were also. So we were lucky. We didn't have to go down the side in the cargo net. We rode the barracks bags over on the last trip.
That was smart.
So, yeah. So, the only trouble is, we didn't get to go ashore that night. We slept all night in the LCT. So, the next morning we got ashore and we went to where we were gonna set up camp, and that was good, that was all right. So, we were working, setting up camp and everything, and one of our platoons was sent up, one of the reporting platoons with radar set was sent up to the northern part of the island, where we had captured a lot of the island by then, not all of it by any means, but we had captured up north quite a little bit. And that's where they wanted to get a radar set up there so they could check on the jet planes coming down from the north. So they sent them up there, and they found out, the Army found out about this time, that an aircraft warning company was not the way to go. It didn't afford enough help, because you had the radar operators, the radio operators, and plotters and communications people, but they didn't have anybody to do guard duty. They didn't have anybody to do KP, you know, maybe 2 men, and that wasn't enough by far, you know, because you had to have guard around the company area, which was probably take up at least a minimum of 8 men there, and you had to have guards around the radar set, which would take up another 8. So you had a minimum of 16 men on duty all night, right? And they had to have a little time off, and they didn't get it. So anyway.
You needed some support units?
Well, what they did is they got a bunch of us guys from the headquarters platoon, about 20 of us, I guess, sent us up north to do guard duty and so forth to help these guys out, because they were dead on their feet, you know. So we went up and helped them out, and they set us up. The company area where they were was up on a little plateau, and down below was a rice paddy, and out in the middle of the rice paddy was where they had the radar set up. So you had to have security around the company area, you had to have security around the radar set. So there again, you know, you're talking like 16 guys every night. So you're on 3 nights and off 2, which wasn't too bad. And you went out at dusk, and you came back at dawn. And at night, nobody moved, nothing moved. Anything that moved got shot. And the civilians knew that too. Everybody knew that. Anything moved at night, you were subject to being shot. No questions asked. So one night was my night off. And we were sleeping in what they called a hospital tent. You could get about, I'd say maybe 15 cots in there, you know. And it wasn't too bad. So it was my night off, and a bunch of us were sleeping in the tent, and there were a lot of Jap stragglers around, a lot of them, and I think about 10 o'clock at night, there was this shooting started, close, and anybody that's been on the rifle range would know what I'm talking about if they work the targets. When a bullet goes through a target, you hear a snap. It's a snap when a bullet goes through a target. And we heard this snap, you know, so I knew there was a bullet somewhere. I was laying down, everybody was laying down. The next morning, well, first I should say, one of the officers got 3 or 4 men together, and they went down and checked this one outpost out of ours to make sure the guys were all right. And yeah, everything was all right. So it had been some Japanese evidently bumped into them, you know, and then that was it. So the next morning, after we ate and everything, the orders were always, nobody leaves the company area without their weapon. But everybody wanted to go down and see what happened, you know, and where things were and the whole thing. And in the meantime, I'm looking around the tent, and I'm looking, and here's a hole where the bullet went through. If I'd have been standing up, I wouldn't be here today. So we went down and looked around, you know, where this action took place and what was going on and everybody. And there was only myself and one other kid. His name was Riley. Got a picture of him there probably. He was a radio operator. He came from St. Louis. And he and I were the only ones that had our weapons with us. Nobody else did. And there were a couple of natives with us also. They came around and were there. and somebody says, there's somebody in the bushes. And there was some stirring in the bushes, like somebody saw a rifle poking out. So we shot, the two of us shot, and we killed this guy. And it was a Jap soldier. He was, you know, one of the stragglers. And I got some stuff there to show you. And our lieutenant says, well, whoever killed him's got to bury him. And the native says, we'll take care of it, you know, we'll take care of it there. So they buried him. And we, either O'Reilly or I could have the rifle, you know, but I didn't want it. And so O'Reilly took it. I don't know if he kept it all the time or not. I think he probably sent it home. But anyway, we kept watching, you know, and out doing our guard duty. And every night, every single night, Japanese planes would come over and they would bomb Tacloban, which was not that far away. That was the largest city, that was the largest town on the island. And they had a dock there that could dock 2 Liberty ships, that's all. They couldn't get any more in. And it was a small, small town, but it was all there was on the island, really. So they would come over and they would bomb it. And you would see those planes, because we had searchlights on them, you know. And the planes would come over, and you'd see the planes and the searchlights, and they'd come over, and it would be a wall of anti-aircraft fire. It would actual wall. And they would go in, you know, and you would count the planes go in, and then you would count how many planes came back out. So you know how many they shot down, you know. And one day, there was this P-38 was pursuing a Japanese plane. And he came down real low. I mean, he was so low that he could see the pilot plain as day. And he came down trying to get away from the P-38. And he circled around and went on around back. And the P-38 followed him all the time. And finally, the P-38 shot him down. And it looked like it was pretty close. So a few of us decided, well, maybe we'd go check on that and see what that was like. So we went out and we started and we walked and we walked and we walked. It was further than we thought. It was
at night? You did this at night?
No, no.
Oh.
No, this was daytime. And we walked and walked. It was probably a couple of miles. And we finally got there. And the natives had gotten there first. And some other soldiers had gotten there first. And of course the natives, they wanted the parachute because they wanted for the cloth, you know. And they had made sure the guy was dead. They hacked him up a little bit with bolo knives too, make sure he was dead. And the other soldiers, they were from, I think they were from the 1st Cavalry. One of the guys got the sword because those pilots carried a sword with them if they were entitled to, you know. Even in the plane, they carried a sword. So he got the sword, and Red Wiley kind of bartered with him. I don't know how or what, but anyway, Red Wiley ended up with the sword and got a picture of the sword there. Oh. And we were up there for probably about 3 weeks, and we were there December the 7th, 1944, because we got information to expect Japanese paratroops on the 7th of December, that they were going to celebrate Pearl Harbor. But nothing happened on the 7th. But after we got back to our company, which was probably 2 or 3 days later, back to our main area where the rest of the company was, there had been some Japanese paratroops dropped, and there was one on the road outside where our entrance was to coming in, where our camp was, and he had been killed, but he laid there for about, I guess about 3, 4, 5 days with an MP guarding him because they were afraid he was booby-trapped. So they had to wait until somebody could come and take care of it, make sure. Anyway, they captured 2 airfields down the road, 2 little airfields where Piper Cubs flew out of, and they held them for about 3 days, and they had to bring some infantry up from the beach to retake those airfields. And then,
So there definitely was still action on Leyte.
oh yeah, oh, action up until, this was December, there was action up until January. Oh yeah. I mean, I could go a little further and say that up in the mountains behind us a ways, the 11th Airborne Division was up there fighting Japanese. And the rumor got around real quick that they found possible cannibalism, you know, practiced by the Japanese on some of our dead. And I don't know if you know, but the Australians have 100 documented cases of cannibalism that the Japanese practiced. And
On Australians?
no, yeah, Australians or even themselves, even their own.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you earlier when you mentioned being in the tent and the Japanese straggler and the bullet hole, they were coming out from hiding because they were starving, right?
Well, they wanted to get back to their own lines because they were on the other side of the island. See, the Japanese were still on the other side of the island, around a place called Ormoc. That would be the west side of the island. And what we did, eventually they wanted to get them out of there because they were really holding us up. They were really putting up a good fight. Mm-hmm. They loaded up one division, and sent them around the island of Leyte over to Ormoc and landed over there and tried to clean them out that way, but that didn't work too good. They had to resupply them, and the Japanese would bomb all the resupply convoys. So I tell you, it was touch and go for a while. It really was. It wasn't all easy going. And it wasn't until, say, the 1st of January, the 15th of January, 45, until that was really cleaned up to where you could say, it was all right. We had natives come to us almost every day and says, you come with me, I show you Japanese, I show you many Japanese. But nobody would go, because we didn't know if it was a setup or not, Nobody would go, but they evidently knew there were a lot of them. And there were a lot of them for a long time. But like I say, it must have been, I know, MacArthur declared the island secure, I don't know when it was, the 15th or the 30th of December, but it wasn't until January, end of January really, when things really got comfortable, where you didn't really have to think about something like that.
I'm surprised that you didn't trust the Filipinos. Did they seem like they were desperate? Like they just wanted...
Oh, they were the poorest people you ever saw, really.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. It wasn't that you didn't want to trust them, but you just weren't so sure, because there were a couple of factions. There were guerrillas that you could trust with anything.
Right.
But then, regular Japanese, regular Filipinos, you just weren't quite sure, But I think on the whole, we probably could have trusted most of them.
Wasn't there a deep hatred for the Japanese on the part of the Filipinos? Or it depends, like you said, if they're civilian or guerrilla fighters?
Well,
like what you said, they hacked him with the sword or whatever. Wasn't there a deep-seated hatred?
Yeah,
for the Japanese occupiers.
Oh yeah, they hated the Japanese. Oh yeah, they hated them with a passion.
Right.
I can't tell you how bad they hated them. Oh yeah, terrible. But there were always. You always were aware of the fact that there could be some collaborators, Mm. You never really knew.
Right.
But on the whole, I felt, in a way that you could really trust them, but you never knew. You never knew. You just weren't comfortable with it.
And you could distinguish Filipino from Japanese?
Oh, sure. Oh, yeah, that wasn't hard. Well, as far as I know, anything I ever saw was they always had a uniform on, or part of a uniform or something, But
and weren't the Japanese smaller? Were they, like more starving?
Well, no, they were about the same size.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they weren't too different. It wasn't too different in size. Mm-hmm. They were about the same stature.
I just think of them the soldiers only getting rations like a bag of rice, and then they're just forgotten about, and they're left to fight the war.
Well, that happened a lot of times. Yeah, that happened a lot of times, I'm sure. But I guess they really tried to live off the land as much as they could, or the population. live off the population. Yeah. So we went on, and
So that helped you earn the Southern Philippine Liberation Medal?
yeah.
Okay.
And we kept there. Well, we had a pretty good area set up. We had I don't want to get too detailed, but we had what was called an RL-26. It was a gasoline-powered reel that could pay out or take up telephone wire, 1 mile reels at a time, 2 of them. And we weren't putting out any telephone wire really or anything, not much, just in around the company area. So what some fellows did is they dug a well, and they took a pump, a hand pump off a water trailer, and hooked that up to the well. And they had it set up so when the reel went around, the handle on the pump would go up, and then when it went down, it would go down, you know, in order to work the pump. And they built a platform up over top, and they put up 55-gallon drums and cut the tops out. And we filled those with water and let the sun heat it, and we had a shower.
Oh.
Yeah, it worked good. Worked real well.
Good. Yeah.
Because one thing was, too, it was a long time after we were there, though, really, because you would get training sessions and so forth. And the medical department would come around, and you had to be aware of, naturally, malaria. And when we were up north, I got dengue fever. A lot of us got dengue fever. You felt like you wanted to die for about a week. And take Atabrine, to make sure you take Atabrine to kill the malaria. You know, you didn't get malaria. But we found out you weren't supposed to bathe in fresh water because there were these liver flukes, and they would burrow in your skin and get in your bloodstream, and they would then go in your intestine, and they would grow a worm. And they showed actual samples of worms they had taken out of Japanese soldiers. Then, my God, they were that long. And
And that's just from bathing in fresh water?
yeah, they were in fresh water, those flukes. Of course, you didn't have to worry about drinking the water because the engineers, that's the first time I think I ever saw what turned out to be backyard swimming pools. The engineers had these big round containers, canvas, large, maybe 15, 20 feet across. And they pumped the water out of the river and chlorinated it and treated it and filtered it and everything. And then they filled it in this, they put it in these, what I call a swimming pool. And the outfits would go there with their water trailer and fill up from those swimming pools, fill the water trailer, take it back. That was your drinking water. And it was perfectly safe to drink. But it was, you weren't supposed to bathe in the raw fresh water because it was possible to get these things. And a lot of other things. Oh boy. They had training sessions on all that stuff, you know, and what not to do.
Parasites?
Pardon?
Parasites and
Oh yeah.
microscopic organisms.
Oh yeah. And then there were always snakes. You know, we, one time, we had to move our equipment, and it had been in a tent for a long time, and it was getting damp, we figured, so we had to get it out of there. So I was on a detail, and everybody was given leather gloves for work, you know, but nobody wore them. I wore them most of the time. And we're moving these crates, you know, boxes. I mean, 2, 3 guys have to lift one, you know, get down under it and lift it, you know. And we got this one, we lifted up, and there's a cobra.
Oh, wow, poisonous.
So everybody kind of paid attention to that. Oh yeah.
Ready to strike?
One guy got a rake, and he finally killed it, but I never saw a snake die so hard. That snake fought to the bitter end. Oh yeah. Really, wow. I never saw anything like
Vicious,
it.
Yeah.
But then the natives, they weren't so much afraid of cobras. They were afraid of this little snake. Was about maybe 1.5 feet long, green, a little green snake about as big as your finger. They were deathly afraid of them. Called them rice snakes. They were deathly afraid of them
Why?
because they were so poisonous,
Oh, okay.
very poisonous.
So did you have any after effects from the dengue fever?
No, no, just when you had it, felt like you wanted to die. It was really bad.
Did you have good medical care there?
Well, what they did is each platoon had a medic. He was, from the medical department, a medic. And he came with us up there. They sent him with us. And he did pretty good. There were no facilities around for treatment. And all he had was aspirin and some things like that, But he took good care of us. He did a good job. Took good care of us. And but nobody really needed any treatment, so to speak.
Was there any air support in case you needed to be evacuated? Was there any kind of air
I suppose if somebody really got hurt, really got bad. Well, there were hospital ships out in the harbor. There was always at least one hospital ship out there. So I assume that's where, bad cases would go if you got whatever.
Do you know the names of the hospital ships that were there?
No, I couldn't tell you. But over at the Presbyterian Church in Red Bank, I met a nurse over there who had been down on a hospital ship when I was down on Lady on the island. She was on one of the hospital ships out there. But
do you remember her name?
no, I don't. Not now, I don't.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and well, then finally they decided, okay, we're going to get you out of here. We're probably going to send you to Okinawa because they had just invaded Okinawa. So they loaded us on an LST down at the harbor. We went down the harbor and we got on an LST, and they sent our captain, Captain Cooper, over to Okinawa to pick out a place for us to set up. So he was out there advance. So here's another close call. He's ready to come back, right, to Lady. And he's waiting in line for the plane. And a major came along, pulled rank on him, says, I'm going, you gotta stay. So he got out of line, the major went. Plane went down the runway, Japanese mortar shell hit it, and everybody got killed. So he came back, and then they decided, no, we're not gonna send you to Okinawa. They took us off the LST, sent us back where we came from, and then about a week later, they sent us down, and we got on landing barges. They took us back to Hawaii,